Bienvenido a mi diario de Inglés Británico, un podcast para hispanohablantes que quieren entender inglés británico con confianza y progresar profesionalmente en el Reino Unido. Soy Shandon, coach nativo de inglés británico. Y sí, también hablo español. En cada episodio hablo en inglés británico real y conversacional, para que practiques tu comprensión auditiva y te acostumbres a cómo hablamos los nativos en la vida diaria. A lo largo de mi vida he aprendido varios idiomas, no solo español, así que hoy quiero hablarte de mis experiencias con los idiomas más comunes que he aprendido. Te recomiendo que escuches este episodio más de una vez. No te preocupes si no entiendes todo. Cada vez que escuches vas a entender más. Vale, empecemos. Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the podcast. I'm very happy to have you here and I'm excited to help you improve your English listening today. So let's get started. This podcast, of course, is a language learning podcast. It's a podcast to help you learn English. One thing you should know is that I love languages. I don't just love teaching English, I also love learning languages. And I've loved learning languages for a very long time. As you know from the introduction, or if you've listened to this podcast for a while, I am fluent in Spanish. And in one of my previous episodes, I spoke about how I learned Spanish. Today, I want to speak about some of the other languages I've learned in my life. And I want to speak about 4 of the most popular ones. For each language, I'm going to tell you why I decided to learn that language, how I learned it, and the level I'm at now with the language. So let's go. Apart from Spanish, I've learned 8 languages in my life so far. Yes, 8, so quite a few. I've learned many different types of language, mostly Western European and Romance languages, but I've also learned other languages too. But today, in this episode, I'm going to speak about 4 of the languages you're likely to know most about. 4 of the most common languages for people here in the UK to learn. I'm going to start with the most common language that English people learn. Probably. I don't know that for certain, but I imagine this is the most common language for English people to learn. And that language is French. Of course, French is spoken in France, which is the closest country to us, the UK. It's not very far at all from the UK. We have a very historical relationship with France, and most people in the UK learn French at school. At least in England, that's the case. I had to learn French for the first 3 years of secondary school. I also learned a tiny bit of French in primary school as well. And I didn't really enjoy learning French at school. To be honest, I didn't like my teachers, which put me off and meant that I didn't put any effort in and I didn't try very hard. Later, after finishing school, I studied French by myself online. I began to self-study, as it's called. And I actually enjoyed it a lot then. But I didn't take it that far. I only learned as a hobby and I didn't spend that long learning it. So now I can speak okay French, very basic French, and I can understand lots of things. I can also read French fairly well, but I'm definitely not fluent and there's a lot that I still could learn in French. Okay, on to the second language that I've learned in my life. That language is Portuguese. I've spent quite a lot of time learning Portuguese in my adult life, and I actually really like Portuguese. It's a language that I want to be fluent in. At the moment, I'm of course fluent in English, my native language, and I'm fluent in Spanish. But I would love to also be fluent in Portuguese. Why did I decide to learn Portuguese? I've always liked the sound of it. I think it sounds really cool, and I just love how the language sounds. And so I first started learning Portuguese many years ago. And I learnt Portuguese by using a language learning app called Babbel. Using that app, I learned lots of vocabulary and I improved my listening. But of course, I didn't improve my speaking using that app. But luckily, I got the opportunity to practice my speaking when I went to Lisbon for 10 days. So I went to Lisbon, very famous city, one of the main cities of Portugal, and I spent 10 days there. So I got to spend lots of time speaking Portuguese. Of course, mostly just transactional conversations in restaurants or cafes or on transport, but it was still a great opportunity to practice everything I'd learned. And I also learned tons of new words, particularly for ordering pastries, because I love pastries. I have a sweet tooth, which means I love sweet things. And so Lisbon has incredible pastries, and I ate loads of them there. As a recommendation, Lisbon is also an amazing place, so I really recommend you go there. Now, how much Portuguese can I speak? I can read Portuguese very well. Because of my Spanish, it helps me a lot to read Portuguese. But I can't remember lots of the words for speaking. So now, because I haven't practiced, I can't speak Portuguese very well, unfortunately. The third language I want to speak about today that I've learned in my life is Italian. Italian, of course, is another Western European language and, of course, also a Romance language. So a language that came from Latin, and it's a Romance language. Italian is quite popular in the UK. It's quite a popular language to learn. And there are lots of Italians in London and people of Italian descent here in London. Why did I start learning Italian? My ex-girlfriend's family is from Italy. And I'd also heard that Italian is similar to Spanish. So I thought it would be easier to learn. That's why I started learning Italian. I first started learning by listening to a podcast on Spotify, a podcast called My Italian Podcast. And I'm always grateful that I found that podcast. It was really great listening practice for me, and I got the paid subscription to the podcast. So every month I paid a small amount. I can't remember how much. It was £5 or £6 or £7 maybe. And that gave me access to more materials to improve my Italian. With that podcast, I learned tons of words. And then I got to speak a tiny bit with my ex's family as well. I then practiced a bit when I went to Rome for 4 days. So I went to Rome in Italy for 4 days, and I got the opportunity to speak a little bit there. Again, just transactional stuff, but it was good to put into practice what I'd learned. Now, like with Portuguese, I can read Italian very well, but unfortunately, I can't speak it because I'm very out of practice. Okay, the final language I want to speak about today that I've learned is German. German, of course, is quite different from the other 3 languages I've spoken about today. So far, I've spoken about French, Portuguese, and Italian, all Romance languages. But German is not a Romance language. English actually is in the same language family as German. English has lots of similarities to the Romance languages, but also has similarities to German. So why did I choose to study and learn some German? I just wanted a different challenge. As I said, I've loved languages for a long time, so I wanted to challenge myself to learn a different language. And in my secondary school, I found some books that taught beginners German. And so I decided to start learning by myself. I studied in my own time as an extra thing. It wasn't one of my lessons or one of the requirements at my school. I just did it on top of my normal lessons. And I started when I was probably about 17 years old. This language was much more difficult than the others that I've mentioned today. It's quite a complicated language with some very, very long words, and the grammar can be quite confusing and complicated. But I enjoyed the experience as it was different, and as I've said a couple of times in this episode, I love languages. Now, I can almost speak no German at all. I can't remember hardly anything from what I learned back then. Because of course it was 12 years ago, and since then I've learned lots of other languages and done lots of other things, which is a shame, but as I said before, when you don't practice a language, you quickly forget these things. So those are 4 of the languages I've learned in my life. I hope you've enjoyed listening to my experiences, and I hope this episode has helped you to improve your listening in English. Remember to listen to this episode again. Each time you listen, you will understand more and you'll improve your confidence listening to and understanding English. Next time, I'm going to speak about 4 more languages that I've learned in my life. This time, speaking about some less common ones that you won't be as familiar with. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Gracias por escuchar este episodio de mi diario de Inglés Británico. Ya has dedicado tiempo a tu aprendizaje hoy, y eso suma más de lo que crees. Poco a poco, tu inglés va a mejorar. Si vives en el Reino Unido y sientes que tu inglés te está frenando profesionalmente, te invito a hacer una evaluación de fluidez profesional gratuita conmigo. En esta sesión, analizo cómo hablas inglés hoy, identifico exactamente qué te está bloqueando y te explico qué necesitas trabajar para hablar con más claridad y confianza. No es una clase, es un diagnóstico claro y honesto de tu inglés hablado. Escríbeme por mensaje en Instagram para reservar tu evaluación. Dejo el enlace a mi cuenta en la descripción del episodio. Gracias y nos vemos pronto. Bye.